Good evening and welcome to another program from the Adams County Historical Society. My name is Antigone Ladd and I serve as a board member here, and I'm delighted to serve as your host this evening. Our programs, we hope, in this ongoing series will be as diverse as the holdings of the Historical Society itself. We have over 1 million artifacts and documents in our collection, and we're working hard to keep them safe. In fact, we're working on a campaign to build a new facility to keep all the items in storage and on display for our many members. We hope you will consider supporting us in our building campaign as well as for our programs. If you wish to make a donation, any amount will be much appreciated. There's a button on your screen that makes it safe and secure. So let me introduce our speaker this evening, who is Bobby Housch, who is a licensed battlefield guide here at the Gettysburg National Military Park. Bobby is not only a licensed battlefield guide, he serves as a history teacher at the Southwestern School District, which is near Hanover, Pennsylvania. Bobby is a native of Chattanooga, Tennessee, but he has moved to Gettysburg, where he enjoys his time teaching and guiding and volunteering at the Adams County Historical Society. Tonight his program is going to be a walking tour of East Cemetery Hill, where he will cover the preparations of both the Union and the Confederate sides for the coming Battle of Gettysburg. It's a fascinating presentation because he superimposes the historic photos of the terrain as it was in 1863, showing buildings that no longer exist, or showing open spaces that are now crowded with commercial businesses. He will walk us through the terrain. He will then add photos of what the land looks like today. So you will come away with a sense of exactly where you are and what happened there. So if you can't get to Gettysburg this month, this week, watch the walking tour with Bobby Housch. He will do it in two parts. This evening he's going to focus on the Union preparations, and next week he will cover the Confederate preparations for the coming battle. So let me turn the program over to our guide, Bobby Housch.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak to your group. I first became interested in East Cemetery Hill when I kept trying to figure out how is it that the Confederates are able to take this top of the hill. Now here's a photograph in 1941 looking to the southeast. Here's the reservoir. This is 1941, a reservoir that used to be here before the water tanks were constructed near this area. Here's the old cyclorama center that used to be along the Baltimore Pike, which is right here. Here's the Howard statue on Cemetery Hill. Here, Weidrich's guns. Colts Hill is over here in that area. Just give you an idea of where we are on a more modern map. East Cemetery Hill is going to be right here. Here's the Soldiers National Cemetery. Here's Evergreen Cemetery. The Colts Hill would be right back here to the back right. Stevens Knoll, McKnight's Hill is right here. The Colt Farm is right out here in that area. So our goals today is to present the significance of Cemetery Hill during the battle. And we're going to talk about the shape and configuration of the hill. This is one of the reasons the Confederates are going to be successful, because this hill has a convex slope. It goes out like this for a ways before it goes down. This makes it difficult, if you're at the top of the hill, to see what's going on at the bottom of the hill. We'll look at Cemetery Hill relationship to other key terrain features. Here's the Lutheran Theological Seminary. This painting was made by George Frankenstein in 1866. Here's the Myers home right here. Here's the David Studi home right here. The military decisions and movements that allow the United States Army to hold onto the hill, even though they make lots of mistakes, as we're going to discover, they eventually are able to hold onto the hill. Before this was known as Cemetery Hill, it had other names like Raffensperger's Hill. It was once owned by Peter Raffensperger and Edward Minchie. The Baltimore Pike runs over the hill, coming up from the south like this, coming to the top of the hill right here before it starts going down on this north slope of the hill. And then there's Wainwright Avenue, which is right here. And Wainwright Avenue was not here at the time of the battle, but a road very close to it was, which was called Brickyard Lane. And this runs pretty close to where Wainwright Avenue runs today. And then there's Culp's Hill in the background. So Brickyard Lane becomes a way for heavy wagons to go around the Baltimore Pike, not go over Cemetery Hill, and use this road to kind of skirt the bottom of the hill to get you into town. So on the top of this area was planted flax, oats, wheats, and corn. This is kind of a panorama right here to give you an area at the time. It's mostly bare at the time. There were some trees. Look in that little more modern perspective. The photograph is taken this way, looking like that, and then the right half is kind of looking off in this direction. So here's a larger view of the left half of the panorama. There's the German Lutheran Church right over here, which is on High Street. So down in this area would be the Gettysburg Tour Center now. And the right part of the panorama is going to show you the Culp Farm right out here. This will be Middle Street. This will be more Hanover Road, York Street area out here in the background. And this is taken in July of 1863. And an 1880 photograph of the same area shows you some gun emplacements when the Gettysburg Battlefield Association had first taken over here. This is Cooper's Battery, a gun of Cooper's Battery along this wall. Weidrich's New York Battery will be over here. Here's the Culp Farm out here in this area. So again, we're talking about right here, and the Culp Farm is right out here in a modern day view. This is the middle school for the Gettysburg Area School District. This is the Lincoln Elementary School right over here. This area is going to be very important in our presentation a little bit later on. So the largest landmark to distinguish Cemetery Hill from the other hills in the area was this very large poplar tree set at the end of this stone wall. It was struck by lightning in 1876, eventually had to be cut down 10 years later. While today many people use this water tank, there's two water tanks, but they use a taller one here to distinguish Cemetery Hill. The poplar tree right here could be used as a landmark on Cemetery Hill soon after the battle to help you identify where Cemetery Hill is. So the civilian cemetery or Evergreen Cemetery is going to be right over here, and the cemetery gatehouse will be right here. So the next photograph I'm going to show you, the photographer is here looking back at the gatehouse like that. Evergreen Cemetery had been formed in 1854 as part of the rural cemetery movement in the United States. Church cemeteries in the town were running out of room, so there was a need for this cemetery. And by 1855, the area was enclosed by fences, and 400 trees have been authorized to be planted on the top of the hill. And then, I mean authorized to be planted on the top. They're still very small, and you can see here in the background of this photograph how small some of these trees really were. The cemetery keeper at this time of the battle was Peter Thorne. He and his family occupied the right half of the cemetery gatehouse, and his in-laws, the Massers, occupied the left or south side here of the cemetery gatehouse. Time of the battle, about 390 people were buried in the cemetery, most of them at the top of the hill. Peter Thorne joined the Union Army in August 1862, leaving his wife Elizabeth and her father in charge of operations here. And Peter and Elizabeth had 3 young sons. She and her father, who was in his 60s, averaged 5 burials per month before the battle, but after the battle, she had over 100 individuals to bury, and she was 6 months pregnant at the time of the battle. There was a post and rail fence on this west side of the Baltimore Pike. This photograph is taken from the cemetery gatehouse looking towards the town, and a rail fence and a stone wall here on the east side of the Baltimore Pike at the time of the battle. Here's a modern photograph by licensed battlefield guide John Archer, kind of showing you the same area that I showed you in the previous photograph, and there's the Gettysburg Tour Center down here. So again, look at that Frankenstein painting in 1866, the Myers House, the Studi House right here, the seminary. Cemetery Hill is important because, first of all, high ground's important. One of the reasons the battle was fought because of the road network, these 10 roads coming in here to Gettysburg. Here's Cemetery Hill, here's the Baltimore Pike, and here's East Cemetery Hill on the east side of the Baltimore Pike. If artillery gets up here and they can manage to fire 1 to 2 miles away, they would control a lot of these roads coming here into the road network. So as we know, at the beginning of the battle, on June 30th, 1863, General Buford's cavalry arrives at Gettysburg. Union infantry arrives to help him against Confederate infantry and artillery on July 1st. And General Oliver O. Howard's 11th Corps arrives for the Union Army with 3 divisions under Francis Barlow here, Adolph von Steinwehr here, and Carl Schurz right over here. Howard sends 2 divisions to the north of the town, Barlow and Schurz, but he leaves von Steinwehr's division on Cemetery Hill as a reserve. And there's 2 brigades in Steinwehr's division, Coster's brigade and Orland Smith's brigade. With Smith's brigade on the west side of the Baltimore Pike are Lieutenant William Wheeler's 13th New York Independent Battery and Lewis Heckman's Battery K, 1st Ohio, a total of about 8 guns. Howard also leaves Michael Rearich's Battery I, 1st New York, 6 3-inch rifles on the hill. This is an 1880s photograph. Here's the old observatory that used to sit on East Cemetery Hill, about where the Winfield Scott Hancock statue is located today. Here are the emplacements for Weidrich's guns. At first, he has 6 guns up here, but 2 of these 6 guns are going to be taken to West Cemetery Hill, near where the Lincoln Address Memorial is today. And they're going to be there on the afternoon of July 2nd to July 3rd and help repulse Pickett's charge. So there's only going to be 4 guns of Weidrich's New York Battery right here. And during the first day, and this photograph is taken from that observatory, and here's some of Weidrich's guns. Now we're looking north into the town. Weidrich's battery is firing to the north of the town. It's also firing at a Confederate battery on the York Road, which would be out of sight over here to the right. Unfortunately, Weidrich's battery also fired into their own men, including Devon's Cavalry Brigade of Buford's division out here in this area. They were marked among themselves that they might be firing into their own men, and finally a staff officer rode back and ordered them to stop. But even then, they thought the staff officer was actually a Confederate and they didn't trust him. But an advantage of Weidrich's battery firing north of the town and being in place on the afternoon of the 1st and all day on the 2nd is they're able to establish their ranges, get very good at knowing where their targets are and how to hit those targets. It's going to help them very much on July 2nd when they see a Confederate officer named Albert Jenkins and his men about 1.7 miles away from East Cemetery Hill. And they go ahead and put a shot over his head and wound him and keep him from moving to the east of their position. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Coster's brigade, which was on Cemetery Hill at first, along with Wheeler's and Heckman's batteries, are eventually sent to the north during the Union retreat back to Cemetery Hill the afternoon of the first day. Of course, Coster Avenue is going to be part of the defense line out there. And Howard, the commander, either goes out with the 1st and 11th Corps lines for a little bit, but then he spends a lot of time on East Cemetery Hill, according to local tradition, here at the home of John Myers. Howard is criticizing for staying on the hill because he can't see what's happening. He can't communicate to his commanders well with couriers, but if he's too close to the action, he can't get the big picture, and that's also a disadvantage. This is the Howard's headquarters marker right here. And here is the Howard statue on East Cemetery Hill. Here's one of the water tanks. But they're not only communicating with couriers, the Signal Corps is going to be present. Each Corps in the Union Army has at least 2 officers and their enlisted men with them. The 11th Corps signal officers are on East Cemetery Hill, right over here in this area, and they're communicating with Aaron B. Jerome from Buford's Cavalry Division, who is in the Lutheran Theological Seminary cupola. And that's where this photograph is taken from the cupola on Seminary Ridge, looking back here to Cemetery Hill, where those 11th Corps signal officers are located. Later, that signal station on East Cemetery Hill was moved to this south side of Cemetery Hill, near where the Lincoln Address Memorial is, and looking down Cemetery Ridge. Here's Meade's headquarters. And here's the Meade's barn, the Leicester barn, the Leicester house. and the Round Tops down here in this area. It appears someone might have also been in the cupola of Pennsylvania College. Later, Lieutenant Jerome moves back to the Adams County Courthouse. So Howard believes he is communicating with his men out there to the north of the town. And as other corps come up, there are signalmen on McKnight's Hill, Powers Hill, right here, there's Powers Hill, and Meade's headquarters and Little Round Top. Just to give you an idea of what that looked like. Here's Cemetery Hill. McKnight's Hill is over here. Here's Powers Hill, Meade's headquarters, and Little Round Top. So here's where these Union signal stations can be located later on in the battle. But Howard is outnumbered, outpositioned. Events are happening too quickly for him to react properly, even if he could. Now, the afternoon of July 1st, the Union line, as we know, collapsed towards Cemetery Hill. And some people stop at Cemetery Hill or land Smith's brigade behind stone walls along the Taneytown Road, put up a good front, inspired some men to stay. But other men just kept going over the hill to the south. And here's the Baltimore Pike in this Alfred Waud drawing. Some of these Union soldiers are not stopping on Cemetery Hill. They keep going south along the pike. And so that's going to have to be prevented. And I'll show you that in just a little bit. James Stewart's Battery B, 4th U.S., arrives with 6 12-pounder Napoleons. And 4 of them are facing north to the town. 1, 2, 3 guns on the east side of the Baltimore Pike. Here's a Baltimore Pike. There's 1 gun over there on the west side. The other side of that is a Soldiers or National Cemetery. 2 of the guns, though, had their pointing rings broken, so they're going to go ahead and move them off this line and face them mostly to the east, to the right of Cooper's Pennsylvania Battery. So there's going to be 3 3-inch guns from Cooper's that's going to be arriving. They're going to be to the right or south of Weidrich's battery, and again, they're mostly facing east. And Stewart's guns, his 2 guns, will be to the south of them, also facing east. Gilbert Reynolds, Battery L, 1st New York, 5 guns under Lieutenant George Breck arrives. They're going to be placed down here. So this is even farther south along this line. And there's Culp's Hill in the distance. There's McKnight's Hill right there to the front right. Breck's battery is mostly facing to the northeast. Eventually, the U.S. will have about 22 guns on East Cemetery Hill by the end of the first day, and 36 guns in all are covering this Cemetery Hill area. So Union cavalry and some infantry had to be placed across the Baltimore Pike. We are now south of East Cemetery Hill. There's the Hancock statue. This is an 1896 photograph. So the Union soldiers had just kept coming south here along the Baltimore Pike in this direction. So Buford's cavalry and some other cavalrymen are placed along here to try to keep them from going farther south. Winfield Scott Hancock arrives with his Signal Corps officers and sees Greenleaf Stevens' 5th Maine Battery parked on the Baltimore Pike here near the cemetery archway. And he orders the commander of the battery to come to him. He orders Stevens to come to him and orders him to McKnight's Hill to fire across the east slope of Cemetery Hill. Stevens has no idea who Hancock is and asks him to identify himself. But after Hancock does, Stevens is going to take his battery from right here at the cemetery gatehouse, south along the Baltimore Pike, and then go into this lane here near the McKnight House and set up over here on McKnight's Hill, which later becomes known as Stevens Knoll. So if we look here, while most of these cannon on Cemetery Hill are firing off in this direction or to the east, now Stevens' main battery here will fire across their front like this. So if an enemy is charging here, they, in theory, should be hit from a crossfire from these Union cannon. Hancock orders what's left of the 1st Corps' Iron Brigade to be placed to the right of Stevens' battery. Of course, here are some of their earthworks that are positioned there to the right. This photograph is taken from Stevens Knoll, looking here towards Culp's Hill. Infantry of Barlow's division under Adelbert Ames now is placed to the right or east of the Baltimore Pike, just like this. This area will be talked about most of our presentation today. Then Church's 3rd Division, 11th Corps arrives, can be placed to the west of the Baltimore Pike along Cemetery Hill like that. And then what's left of Church's division and the 11th Corps arrives. Buford's cavalry is positioned down here farther along with the 2nd Corps. And finally, the 12th Corps arrives. Some of them go to the Munshower Hill, Little Round Top area. That's one division goes down there. Another division goes right over here towards Colts Hill. All this time, for various reasons, Confederates have decided not to attack the Union as they're forming their line here at the end of the first day, and we'll briefly talk about that a little bit later on. So this Union fishhook line, as it is called, is going to protect the two major lifelines for the Army of the Potomac, the Baltimore Pike right here and the Taneytown Road right there. So keep in mind, that's another reason, besides the way the hills are formed, is what is the advantage of the fishhook line to protect these two roads. Controversy rose between Hancock here on the left and Howard on the right over who exactly is going to be in charge here. Howard says, well, we were arguing for a little bit, but then we came to a compromise, and it was decided that no one's really in charge, but I'll take command of the soldiers on the east side of the Baltimore Pike, and Hancock will take charge of the soldiers on the west side of the Baltimore Pike. But Hancock, when he hears about this, has none of it. He's saying, no, I was in charge of the whole line, no matter what Howard says. When the 12th Corps reaches Colts Hill, as we know, they start to fortify their position. There's plenty of trees here. They start to cut down those trees and pile rocks up to construct fortifications. The artillery of the 1st Corps and the 11th Corps also begins to dig in here on East Cemetery Hill. And this is an 1863 photograph of these Union artillery positions, these lunettes that are dug out here on East Cemetery Hill. And there's that poplar tree. And I'll show you, this is Stewart's Battery right over here as they get placed. This is a Baltimore Pike. And here's one of the guns, a Stewart's Battery in the reconstructed lunette right here. So Union artillery opened on Confederate scouting parties and Avery's North Carolina Brigade as it started to move this way towards Colts Hill and East Cemetery Hill on the night of July 1st, and they drove them away. Elizabeth Thorne comes out to show the soldiers where the roads are so they can match them up with their maps. Because she's 6 months pregnant, she is shielded by a horse when she goes out there on the top of East Cemetery Hill. East Cemetery Hill is a good position for artillery if you have targets far in the distance. And again, this photograph is taken from the top of that observation tower. Here's Weidrich's battery. Here's the old reservoir, which used to be down in this area before they constructed the water tanks right down here. Of course, there's the town of Gettysburg. The seminary is right over here to the left. Baltimore Pike was eventually located here because there's a saddle here between West Cemetery Hill and East Cemetery Hill. And you have this gap here in the middle. I want to give you an idea about this. If I had the high ground here on East Cemetery Hill on the right side, put my cannon here, then the ground dips down here to the left, and out of sight of the photograph here, it goes up again to the right into the soldiers or national cemetery area. So this is a good spot for your limbers and your caissons from your artillery, so that those Confederate artillery shells coming in your area have a less chance of hitting you if you're in this low ground here behind these guns. But because the hill bows out away from us, it has that convex curve to it. Sometimes we cannot see the bottom of Cemetery Hill. We have blind spots in front of us. In places, there's a significant amount of ground in front of the cannon that are going to hide the bottom of the hill from the artillerymen here. Confederates are going to have a very large artillery barrage on this position before their infantry assault. They want to soften up the position. We'll talk about the infantry assault later, but the main reason Confederates are going to strike from two sides is because Cemetery Hill is a salient. It sticks out here like a sore thumb, and you always try to hit a salient from two sides, two directions. First, Confederates need to place their artillery. General Ewell from the 2nd Army Corps for the Confederates can only find good artillery positions for 2 of his 5 artillery battalions. Battalions consist of 4 to 5 batteries, and Ewell's artillery are mostly placed on Seminary Ridge and Benner's Hill. Ewell has 80 guns available, but can only bring 32 of his guns into line to fire on Cemetery Hill. Major Joseph Latimer is just 19 years old. He places 20 guns or 4 batteries on Benner's Hill, which is 3/4 of a mile to the east of Cemetery Hill, just beyond Rock Creek. And the rest of Ewell's guns that he can bring into position to fire on Cemetery Hill are on Seminary Ridge, including these Whitworths from Hardaway's Alabama Battery, which, as we know, are later going to be placed up near where the Peace Light is on Oak Hill. But on the northern edge of Seminary Ridge, just south of the seminary buildings, A.P. Hill of the 3rd Corps has managed to bring 52 guns into line that'll fire on the cemetery, stretching from the seminary down West Confederate Avenue, what is today West Confederate Avenue, past McMillan House, down past the North Carolina State Monument. Therefore, there will be a converging fire on Cemetery Hill from about 84 Confederate cannon. Now that afternoon, Longstreet lines up his artillery here to the south to bombard the left of the Union line when he has finally made it down here to the south. And then right away, after Longstreet's guns start firing here, Ewell's guns start firing up here in this direction to keep the Union looking in this direction. Before the Confederate bombardment, Major Thomas Osborne, who commanded 11th Corps Artillery, asked Henry Hunt for more guns, and 26 guns are brought up on Cemetery Hill to be placed between the Baltimore Pike and the Taneytown Road. So 2 batteries, 12 guns will be eventually brought to the East Cemetery Hill area. 6 guns, 20-pounder parents under Eli Taft of the 5th New York are facing east or northeast, and here's the Baltimore Pike ahead of them here. Taft's guns are actually in the cemetery facing to the north, the northeast, and the east. And again, the cemetery then did not have nearly the amount of graves that it has now. Taft's guns are going to be firing over the heads of the gunners on East Cemetery Hill. This rarely happened on Civil War battlefields. They would more than a few times fire over infantrymen's head, but it was kind of rare for artillerymen to be firing over other artillerymen's heads. The Cemetery Hill is considered to be very important. These methods are going to be deployed. So again, Taft's guns would be here, and down here are going to be other Union guns that Taft's guns will be firing over their heads. Cemetery Hill has different levels of height, and this drawing is taken from Stevens Knoll, and out here in the distance, you're going to go ahead and see the Evergreen Cemetery Gatehouse, and Taft's guns are up here firing, and below them are going to be Breck's Battery, and they're going to have cannon fire passing over them as they fire towards Confederates out of sight here to the right. Breck's Battery is right here. You can see these lunettes drawn. Again, Culp's Hill is here in the distance. Breck's Battery complains some of those 20-pounder shells were exploding prematurely amongst them and killed 2 of Breck's horses. Taft's guns were placed by about 3:30 to 4 in the afternoon. So by that time, there's 70 guns on Cemetery Hill and East Cemetery Hill for the United States. So around 3:30 or 4 o'clock, the 84 Confederate guns are firing at the 70 Union guns up here on Cemetery Hill and East Cemetery Hill. Lieutenant Edward Whittier commanded the 5th Maine Battery on Stevens Knoll after a sharpshooter skirmisher shot a bullet through Captain Stevens' thigh, and he's out of commission. Whittier saw Confederate batteries appearing on Benner's Hill, and this photograph is on Benner's Hill. And this photograph is taken towards Culp's Hill, which is going to be half a mile away from Benner's Hill right over here. And East Cemetery Hill is going to be 3/4 of a mile away. And you can see the water tank right here on East Cemetery Hill. So these guns on Benner's Hill have about, if you're firing towards East Cemetery Hill, go about 3/4 of a mile. And here is a red line showing you Benner's Hill, where these Confederates are going to be. There's 40 Union cannon on East Cemetery Hill, Stevens Knoll, and actually on Culp's Hill, firing at 20 Confederate cannon over here on Benner's Hill. And an officer in Cooper's Battery, and here's Cooper's Battery right here, their left gun of Cooper's Battery, said the Confederate artillery shells came thick and fast, bursting, crashing, and plowing, a mighty storm of iron hail. A most determined and terrible effort of the enemy to cripple and destroy the guns upon this hill. Situated as we were in the center of our artillery line, our batteries received the full force of the enemy's front, oblique, and flank fire. An officer in the 33rd Massachusetts, their monument's right down here, and this is from Stevens Knoll looking back here towards Cemetery Hill, says that overshots from Seminary Ridge, which would be out of sight in this direction, came over Cemetery Hill and plowed into their men of the 33rd Massachusetts down here. So let's go up to the wall between Weidrich's battery here on the left and Cooper's Battery, which would be here to the right side of the wall. There's infantry at the bottom of the hill, and behind these stone walls facing to the north and also facing to the east. Colonel Wainwright, who's in charge of the Union artillery here in this area, says during this artillery duel, he saw 2 instances of damage that could be caused by a single shot as he sits on this wall right here between Cooper's battery, which would be over here, and Weidrich's battery right over here. The 54th New York is on this side of the stone wall, looking to the north, and a Confederate artillery shot from Benner's Hill comes like this along their line, outflanks them. And one of the shells literally plowed at 2 to 3 yards of men, killing or wounding a dozen or more, according to Wainwright. Wainwright said another shell burst directly under the left gun of Cooper's battery right here. And it killed one man right away, blew another man to pieces so that he died within half an hour, and wounded 3 other people. And this incident greatly impressed Wainwright. 5 other men came forward to take the place of their dead and wounded comrades, pulled them out of here right away, and they even fired another shot from this gun before the wounded could be removed. The person who was blown to bits, which is James McCleary, he had lost his right hand, his left hand at the shoulder, and his ribs were so broken over that one could look into his body. He was removed here inside the well on the other side of the gatehouse here at Evergreen Cemetery. And this is where he's going to die. And he is now buried in the soldier section of Evergreen Cemetery. So batteries on the west side of Cemetery Hill are also engaged, especially with their counterparts of the Confederates on Seminary Ridge. And these guys up here said there came a storm of shot and shell, marble slabs were broken, iron fences shattered, horses disemboweled. The air was full of wild and hideous sounds. The low buzz of the round shot, the whizzing of the elongated balls, and the stunning explosion of the shells overhead and all around. This is Licensed Battlefield Guide Fred Hawthorne. I forgot to point out Deb Novotny right here, Licensed Battlefield Guide, as she's standing by the well here in Evergreen Cemetery. So several tombstones were struck and damaged by this artillery fire. Bombardment is going to last an hour and a half to 2 hours. And while the Confederates are concentrating their artillery fire here on Cemetery Hill and East Cemetery Hill, the Union fire in reply is dispersed over a wide area. They're firing in all different directions while the Confederates are concentrating on this one section. Despite the initial Confederate success, though, Union batteries were mostly able to hold their positions. Cooper's battery had to withdraw its guns, and Ricketts' battery, their monument's right here, is going to take the place of Cooper's. One of Ricketts' men actually found the hand of James McCleary from Cooper's battery here and buried it in the lunette. Union guns have an advantage because they're on higher ground than the Confederate guns on Seminary Ridge and Benner's Hill. Union has good equipment and good ammunition. Union has more guns. They have them on East Cemetery Hill, Stevens Knoll, and Culp's Hill. And there's about, again, 40 of them firing at the 20 Confederate cannon on Benner's Hill. Slowly, the Union advantages make their fire more effective. And here's Weidrich's battery. Here's the old cyclorama building along the Baltimore Pike. On Benner's Hill, Latimer's guns were smothered by Union fire. Latimer loses 51 men and 30 horses. He orders his batteries to withdraw. Latimer attempts to cover the withdrawal of the guns off the hill when he was mortally wounded, and he dies on August 1st, 1863. So by 6 o'clock, the artillery barrage on July 2nd, 1863 is over. Confederate attempt to drive Union artillery off Cemetery Hill has failed. After bombardment, this end of the battlefield was relatively quiet for a couple of hours. I'll take you up here to the top of Cemetery Hill and talk about the military crest, or lack thereof, with these infantry soldiers on East Cemetery Hill. Infantry of Barlow's 1st Division, now commanded by Adelbert Ames, who had at one time trained the 20th Maine Infantry, is placed here to the right or east of the Baltimore Pike. And there's 2 brigades. Ames's old brigade is now right here under Colonel Andrew L. Harris. They're going to be facing mostly to the north. And then Leopold von Gilsa's brigade is going to be mostly facing to the east. Brigades at Gettysburg should number 1,500 men. So there should be 3,000 people here. But after the first day's fighting around Barlow's Knoll, there's only 600 men in each brigade, or a total of 1,200 men instead of the 3,000 men that you would expect to be here. It seems no one really took that to heart in consideration, and they think there's plenty of Union soldiers here. This 11th Corps had been beaten up 2 months before Gettysburg at the Battle of Chancellorsville, and on the first day of Gettysburg, they're badly beaten up. Infantrymen in the 11th Corps are very tired. The morale is not good. Almost every regimental officer in Harris's and von Gilsa's brigade, who commanded at the beginning of July 1st, had been killed, wounded, or captured. So all regiments will now be receiving orders from new regimental commanders. They're going to be in very unfamiliar positions. And their infantry is poorly placed. They are not placed on the military crest of the hill. The military crest is the highest spot where one could be placed without any blind spots in front of your position. This is a geographic crest, and there's plenty of blind spots in front of our position here. So again, we're standing on the topographical crest of the hill. We have these blind spots right over here. And the blind spots occur here because this is a convex hill. This hill is bowing out in front of us so that we can't look right down it to the bottom. So again, this is a good position for artillery if you have targets far in the distance, but because the hill has a convex slope and bows out away from us, we can't see the bottom of the hill. Where should the Union infantry have been placed? This photograph has been taken from the Wainwright Avenue or Brickyard Lane area, looking at the top of the hill. Here's the Howard statue. The infantry, the military crest, would be right about here where I'm pulling this arrow across. This is where the Union should have been digging earthworks, maybe moving some of these stones over here to face in this direction, but they don't do it. There's nothing that happens like that here at all. The infantry are not digging in. So you need to be below the cannon, but above Brickyard Lane here. The tired and beaten up infantry are not made to dig the trenches. They are allowed to use the easiest protection available, which are the stone walls which are already existing. So the infantry is placed behind these stone walls here on Brickyard Lane and other stone walls like this one, and they'd be facing north. While the walls are protected, this position is full of blind spots. The ground rises in front of these positions, and if your enemy infantry is charging toward you, you can't see them till they're right here on top of you. The original Brickyard Lane ran right here, and here's Wainwright Avenue. This photograph is taken facing north, so the top of East Cemetery Hill will be over here to the left. And so Brickyard Lane ran like this. Wainwright Avenue comes along later on. It does not appear that the Union infantry from the 11th Corps at the bottom of the hill are coordinating or communicating with Colonel Wainwright, who's in charge of the 1st Corps artillery up here at the top of the hill. And they're not talking about, hey, what's going to happen if we're attacked? Do we run back up here to the top of the hill right away so you have a clear field of fire? Or should we stay at the bottom of the hill? Or what should we do? Nobody talks about this at all, and that is going to be not convenient for the Union artillery at the top of the hill or this Union infantry at the bottom of the hill when they do get attacked. Troops in the west part of Cemetery Hill aren't digging in, but they have an advantage. They don't have a convex slope. They have a gentle slope right here. This means you have the high ground here on the left, and it goes right here to the bottom of the hill. So you can be at the topographical crest and the military crest way over here to the left and not have to worry about exactly where the military crest is of West Cemetery Hill. Another problem that the East Cemetery Hill soldiers have is that after things start to settle down on July 1st and get stabilized here, they are under the impression that their position will not be attacked. So therefore, it'd be just a waste of energy for these soldiers to go ahead and dig trenches. So we need to take you back to the time when the infantry were first placed on East Cemetery Hill. We need to get you back to that situation on late of the afternoon of July 1st when the Union soldiers are first retreating to the hill. When the Union soldiers leave north of town and come through the town and start forming up on Cemetery Hill, they're very disorganized. Howard's wants some infantry soldiers facing the town, and the 107th Ohio Regiment's Colonel, Seraphim Myers, here on the left, refused the orders of General Howard on the right to stop on the top of East Cemetery Hill. He just keeps having his men go over the south part of the hill back towards Baltimore. He was arrested and his regiment was ordered to go back to East Cemetery Hill and be placed on the front lines. So there's another regiment that's going to be to their right. The 17th Connecticut was asked, look, boys, how brave are you? We're going to take you here to this front wall. And they got here to the front wall, and they were pretty satisfied there. Of course, this photograph is taken from the top of the Evergreen Cemetery gatehouse. Then they said, look, boys, are you brave enough to go down to a second fence or wall right down here? And they said they would. They go down here with a cheer. And on their left will be the 7th Ohio, which I believe arrived soon after the 17th Connecticut got in this position up here. That evening, an officer came to the top of the hill looking for a Pennsylvania regiment specifically. And they go to the 73rd Pennsylvania. And I guess they want a Pennsylvania regiment because they speak Pennsylvanian to the townspeople or something. So they said, look, we need you guys to go out and see how far the Confederates have actually advanced into the town on the afternoon of the first day. So the 73rd Pennsylvania is going to be going down the Baltimore Pike, 3 companies on the right side, 2 companies right here on the road. Each company is about 30 men, and then 2 companies on the left side of the Baltimore Pike, and 2 are in reserve as they start to move down this area towards the houses at the south end of the town. They would pass the Captain John Myers home. Later on, this becomes an orphanage, which of course we'll talk about in a little bit. It was visited in 1867 by Ulysses S. Grant, who's going to be standing right here. And John Myers and his wife Esther purchases property in 1856. The wife, Esther Myers, dies in 1858, and her property goes to her children from a previous marriage. So John Myers signed a prenuptial agreement with a widow named Margaret Plank in 1859. And under this prenup, Margaret was not allowed to get any property when John Myers dies. She would keep her own farm from her previous marriage, and her son David, who's 8 years old, is going to stay on that farm, which is near Willoughby Run. So John Myers has her live here in this house with him, and he would provide for her and her daughter Anna, who's 4 years old, and Margaret is supposed to take care of him in his old age. And when John Myers dies, Margaret Plank would receive a whopping $500 and 2 cows. Margaret Plank was the grandmother of future Hall of Fame pitcher Eddie Plank. Eddie Plank is right here after he and his Philadelphia Athletics won the 1913 World Series over the New York Giants. His manager, Connie Mack, is right here as they are traveling through Devil's Den and taking a tour of the battlefield. So on the night of July 1st, Elizabeth Thorne was requested to prepare a meal for General Howard back up there at the gatehouse. So she says, I had put some meat for safekeeping down at the home here of Captain Myers. I went down there about dark to get some of it. There were 4 hams and a shoulder there. The house was filled with wounded soldiers, and none of the family was about. I saw a lot of men lying in rows, and 6 of them did not move, and that scared me. And I took a nervous chill and hurried home without any of that meat. The Myers home was sold to private parties in 1865. Here's the Myers home. Later, it has a mansard roof placed on top of it to give it another story. And of course, you know about the Amos Humiston story, the photograph found that identifies who he was when they buried him in the Soldiers and National Cemetery. And now his wife and the kids later going to come up here to start an orphanage, be part of the starting of the orphanage up there on East Cemetery Hill. And this frame building was added in 1869, and here's the Myers home right here on the right. Of course, this frame building, now known as a homestead, was farther from the Baltimore Pike than it is today. And this National Soldiers Orphans Homestead was closed in late 1877 because they're lacking money, and there's also charges of mistreatment of the orphans. And so finally, these buildings were sold at a public auction in 1878. So as the 73rd Pennsylvania keep moving down the Baltimore Pike, there's going to be the Dr. David Study home here on the left. Here's the Wagon Hotel, and here's the Conrad Snyder home here on the right. And this is, again, an Alfred Waugh drawing of sharpshooters here firing at Confederates that would be at these buildings down here at the south end of town. Here's Baltimore Street as it starts going up Baltimore Hill. As we get closer, here's an actual photograph of the Wagon Hotel here and the Snyder House here on the right. And there was a stone wall and a board fence on this side of the Snyder House that the 17th Connecticut and the 107th Ohio are going to be stopping at for their main battle line. We'll talk about their main battle line here in just a little bit. But the 73rd Pennsylvania has to still keep going down this road. So here is the Snyder House here on the right. Dr. David Stude's house was over here on the left of the Baltimore Pike. The Wagon Hotel is here. Then there's John Rupp's house and John Rupp's tannery. So they're going to be moving on either side of the Baltimore Pike and down the Baltimore Pike, looking to see if there's any Confederates in the houses up here. At a firing of a pistol shot by Captain Kelly of the 73rd Pennsylvania, the men advanced to a point beyond the Rupp Tavern. Here's a smokestack from the Rupp Tanyard right here. And at the tannery, they received a well-directed fire of musketry from the enemy who were posted in houses down here. And a lot of the 73rd Pennsylvania guys said, okay, we understand where the Confederates are. Let's get back to the top of the hill. It's not going to happen that quick. I'm going to have to show you some fighting that's going to take place here later on. The Wagon Hotel sat on what was the advanced Union skirmish line. Here's, again, part of the Rupp Tannery right there. A couple of 3 solid shots do go through the Wagon Hotel. At the time of the battle, a couple of U.S. soldiers were killed here. The 73rd Pennsylvania will occupy this, and later on the 74th Pennsylvania will occupy this structure. David Bluebaugh, who had married Agnes Snyder, and Conrad Snyder's home was over here on the left. And there's the Stude house up there at the top of the hill. He ran the Wagon Hotel at the time of the battle. It's later going to burn down in 1895. It had been renamed the Battlefield Hotel, and it was later replaced by this structure, which is going to have to close after World War II, soon after World War II. Notice in this photograph that the Rupp Tannery is down here on the left. Here's the old Rupp house. On the right, there's 3 houses here, the Welty house, the McCrary house, and the Weinbrenner house right here on the right side of the road. Also notice this big field here on the right. If you're a battlefield guide, you give tours. A lot of times visitors say, what happened to the Confederate prisoners after they were captured on the first day's field? A lot of the prisoners from Archer's brigade and Davis's brigade were kept in this large field here where the 1863 Inn of Gettysburg is located today. For those who know Gettysburg for a long time, this also used to be the site of the old Holiday Inn, used to be right here. So we're going to look at the battle line of the 107th Ohio, the 17th Connecticut, and later on the 25th Ohio Regiment. It's going to be something like this. It's going to be a line like this. Here's the Jenny Wade house down here. So the Snyder home would have sat about right in here. And this battle line is along an old stone wall in a board fence that ran kind of like this. So the Union are going to be facing to the right or north. And there's the mountains to the west of us. And again, here's a side of that battle line up here on Cemetery Hill. And this is a marker for the 107th Ohio, where they're going to be placed later on in the battle, but they actually stretched way down here. And here's that 1863 Inn of Gettysburg right here. They stretched way down here towards the Baltimore Pike. And again, here's that marker. This is where the water tanks are located today. And their line keeps going like this towards another marker for the 107th Ohio and then the 25th Ohio right over here. So I've marked this line in blue, 107th Ohio on the left, 17th Connecticut, then the 25th Ohio and the 75th Ohio. And they're all pretty much facing north. Problem is they need a skirmish line out in front of them to show them exactly where the Confederates are. Notice how the ground in this area going off to the north is still has a convex slope. It goes way out here before it goes down the bottom of the hill. So there's a huge blind spot here in front of this main battle line that they're trying to establish. So that skirmish line is going to leave the battle line here. You see the markers. This is a more modern photograph of the one that I just showed you. And it's going to move down here to Locust Avenue. What is today Locust Avenue? We can see these houses out here. Locust Avenue is a great spot because it is the military crest of the north part of East Cemetery Hill, and it allows you to see Confederates that are on High Street. Right up here, we see the buildings. This is where the German Lutheran Church was located. There's another church there now, and other buildings here on High Street. And this is going to be very important for later on in our visit here. This is the Lincoln Elementary School, and in the front is a parking lot that used to be called Winebrenner's Run. It used to be in the area where this parking lot is. So you're going to have Confederate skirmishers. They're going to be in here in Winebrenner's Run, firing at these Union skirmishers that are here on Locust Avenue. Now, the west side of Locust Avenue stretches out to the Baltimore Pike right here and the Rupp House and Tannery. And the 73rd Pennsylvania is approaching here from left to right. And of course, this tannery has been rebuilt, but there are some original parts of the original Rupp house here. And John Rupp is in the basement of the tannery, as it's called today, when the Confederates, mostly from Georgia in this area, are coming here from right to left into the house. The 73rd Pennsylvania is coming from left to right, and they're fighting here in the house and around the house. And the Confederates finally capture the tannery area. Yeah, so what? Well, when they captured the tannery, and this is Locust Avenue, facing down to where the tannery is, here's the garages at the tannery, the stop sign is at the Baltimore Pike. The Union soldiers on Locust Avenue are now outflanked on their left. And the Confederates now have a crossfire on this Union skirmish line. They're being hit from the front, from right to left, and they're being hit on the left-hand side like this. So the Union soldiers now have to retreat hundreds of yards up the hill here back to their main battle line, which we can't even see in this photograph. It is so far away from the skirmish line. And they pull back to this position where they now no longer have a skirmish line out in front of them, and now all they have are these big blind spots. So when they get attacked by Confederates here, many of them won't see the Confederates coming until it is too late. So they fold back to this battle line right here in 107th Ohio, 17th Connecticut, 25th Ohio, 75th Ohio, and they have lost their early warning system of the skirmish line here. After reconnaissance of the 73rd Pennsylvania, Confederate skirmishers began to occupy these buildings like the Winebrenner House on the southern part of the town. So we're going to stop here for now, and next time in part 2 of the presentation, we're going to show you the Confederate situation and how they're going to be trying to attack Cemetery Hill, East Cemetery Hill area. This is Licensed Battlefield Guide John Archer, standing up near High Street, facing East Cemetery Hill, and there's our water tank right there. And we'll talk about that next time. So thank you very much for letting me give you this program. I will see you with part 2 at some other time.